The Young and the Restless spoilers shock. In Los Angeles, beneath the sterile glow of hotel chandeliers and the hum of power that hid in every conversation, Sienna Bacall's world began to splinter. Since the moment Matt Clark reappeared, the fragile control she once held over her life had been shattered beyond repair. He was supposed to be dead, a chapter sealed, a name erased, yet there he was, alive, swaggering through the corridors of her existence as if he owned the air she breathed. His arrogance filled every room he entered, his voice slicing through her thoughts like glass, mocking, commanding, humiliating her with a cruelty disguised as charm. He no longer cared about appearances, he didn't have to. He had become untouchable, a man who believed himself beyond consequence, because he knew too many secrets, hers most of all. And so, he tormented her without restraint, each word, each smirk, each cold laugh another reminder that she was trapped in a prison of her own making. Matt had a way of turning every encounter into a performance, a cruel game in which Sienna was both participant and audience. She tried to fight back, at first with words, then with silence, but nothing she did could stop him. He would brush her protests aside, dismiss her tears as melodrama, even take pleasure in the fear that flickered in her eyes when he reminded her that she owed him everything. For years, she had kept his secrets. His forged identities, his hidden accounts, his manipulations buried under layers of lies, and that made her complicit. Now, those same secrets chained her to him. Every time she thought of escaping, he would whisper a single name, a single detail from her past that could destroy her if it ever reached the wrong ears. That was how he controlled her, not through violence, but through knowledge. The pressure inside her built until her days became an endless loop of dread and guilt. She could barely sleep, haunted by fragments of the man she once thought she loved and the monster he had become. Her reflection in the mirror was no longer familiar, her once steady hands now trembled, her eyes hollowed by sleepless nights, her voice brittle when she spoke. The people around her noticed, but none dared to ask. They had learned that when it came to the Bacalls, silence was the safest choice. Matt, meanwhile, was busier than ever, spinning webs of deceit with the precision of a man who enjoyed his own corruption. He met frequently with Claire and Holden, drawing them into his orbit with promises of power, money, and revenge. The meetings always took place in dimly lit corners of expensive restaurants or the back offices of private clubs, where secrets were traded like currency. Claire, restless and disillusioned, found herself captivated by Matt's charisma, blind to the danger in his smile. Holden, torn between loyalty and ambition, convinced himself that aligning with Matt was a temporary necessity. But neither of them truly understood the darkness of the man they were dealing with. Together, they plotted against people who had once trusted them, Noah, Victoria, even Nick, building plans that blurred the line between strategy and sin. Sienna would watch them from a distance, her heart tightening with every whispered meeting, every conspiratorial glance. She had known Matt was dangerous, but this was something far worse. He wasn't just manipulating for power, he was orchestrating something cruel, something designed to break the very foundation of the Newman family. And when she overheard her own name among the pieces of his plan, she knew the clock was ticking. Then came the moment that pushed her beyond fear and into desperation. She saw Victoria Newman standing alone on the terrace of the Los Angeles Hotel, calm, composed, unaware of the storm about to reach her. Sienna froze, torn between flight and confrontation. For months, she had carried the burden of a truth too heavy to speak, a secret that had the power to destroy not only Victoria's sense of self but the very identity she clung to. She had promised Matt she would never reveal it, that the letter from Cole would remain hidden forever, but something inside her cracked when she looked at Victoria that day. There was something in the woman's eyes. A quiet kindness, a strength born from suffering, that made Sienna's silence feel unbearable. Victoria was a mother in every sense of the word, protective, devoted, capable of enduring unimaginable loss, and yet, unbeknownst to her, the child she loved as her own was not of her blood. That was the truth buried in Cole's final letter, the one Sienna had intercepted years ago when Matt first began manipulating Victoria's life. Matt had kept it as leverage, using it to ensure that Victoria would never truly escape his influence if he ever decided to return. And now, that secret was the weapon he planned to use again. But Sienna couldn't let him do it. As the wind swept through the balcony, Sienna approached her slowly, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear her own thoughts. Victoria turned, surprised, offering the polite smile she gave to acquaintances she barely trusted. But Sienna didn't return it. Her eyes were wide, her face pale, her hands trembling as if holding something invisible yet heavy. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. The words felt too dangerous to exist. But then she remembered Matt's mocking laughter, the cruelty in his eyes when he boasted that Victoria would never know the truth until he wanted her to. That was the moment something inside Sienna broke. She told Victoria everything. About the letter Cole had written before his death, about how it revealed that the girl Victoria had believed to be her biological daughter was not hers at all, about how Matt had used that secret as a leash to control everyone involved. She told her how Matt had lied, manipulated medical records, and planted evidence to keep the truth buried, and how he was planning to use it now to destroy what little piece Victoria had left. Every word came out trembling, fragmented, but true. Victoria stood frozen, her world collapsing in slow motion. The idea that her child, the one she had loved, protected, and built her life around, might not be hers was too cruel to process. Her mind refused to believe it, yet something in her heart already knew. She could see it in Sienna's face, the kind of haunted guilt that only comes from truth too painful to fabricate. For a moment, neither woman spoke. The city stretched out behind them, glittering and distant, indifferent to the heartbreak unraveling in its shadow. When Victoria finally found her voice, it was barely a whisper. She asked for proof, for the letter itself, for something tangible that could either confirm or destroy what she'd just heard. But Sienna hesitated. The letter was no longer in her possession, Matt had it. He kept it locked away, part of his arsenal of secrets, knowing it was his greatest insurance against everyone who had ever crossed him. Victoria's expression hardened then, transforming grief into determination. She would find that letter. She would uncover every lie. And when she did, Matt Clark would regret ever crawling out of the grave. That night, Sienna returned home to find Matt waiting. He knew. Somehow, he always knew. The look on his face was pure rage tempered by a twisted kind of satisfaction. He didn't need to raise his voice, the silence between them was enough to make her tremble. He told her she had made a mistake she couldn't undo, that she had betrayed him, that now she was no longer his partner, she was his liability. Sienna wanted to run, to scream, but she was past fear now. For the first time, she saw Matt for what he truly was, not a man, but a sickness that infected everyone around him. And for the first time, she realized there was only one way to end it. Far away, Victoria sat alone in her hotel room, staring at the skyline. In her hand was a small locket, the last gift from the child she now wasn't sure she had ever truly known. Her mind replayed every moment, every hug, every smile, now tainted by doubt. She wanted to hate Sienna for telling her, but she couldn't. Because even through the pain, she sensed that the truth had been meant as mercy. As dawn broke, Sienna packed a small bag and slipped into the night, her heart pounding with both terror and purpose. She no longer cared about protecting herself. The lies had gone too far. Somewhere in the darkness, Matt Clark was still weaving his web, but Sienna had finally chosen a side. She would find the letter, she would destroy his empire of secrets, and she would free herself even if it meant exposing everything. And back in Genoa City, as the first news of Victoria's collapse reached the Newman estate, Nikki felt the familiar chill of dread creeping back into her bones. The past, it seemed, had never really left them. It had only been waiting, and now, through Sienna's confession and Matt's vengeance, it was ready to consume them all once more. The night Sienna Bacall decided to tell the truth, the air in Los Angeles was thick with a silence that felt almost divine, the kind of silence that comes before destruction. For months, she had lived in a house that looked perfect from the outside but was rotten at its core, trapped in a marriage that had long since stopped being real. Matt Clark, her husband, her tormentor, had returned to life like a ghost claiming his kingdom, and since then, her sanity had begun to unravel. He treated her like property, an accessory to his delusions of power, a vessel to carry his secrets. She had once believed she could endure it, that she could survive his manipulation the way she survived everything else. But she had been wrong. His cruelty had no limit. Each time he raised his voice, each time his hand came down in violence, each time he reminded her that no one would ever believe her, a part of her soul withered. Yet what he did not know was that fear, when pushed too far, stops obeying. It turns to fire. And so, when she saw the Newmans together, Victoria, Nick, Victor, and Sharon, standing by one another through pain, unbreakable even in their grief, something inside Sienna began to shift. She saw what loyalty looked like, what strength felt like when it wasn't built on control or deception. For the first time in years, she wanted to be saved. But she also knew that no one could save her until she chose to stop being silent. That silence broke the moment she confessed the one truth that Matt had sworn her to protect above all else, that his biological daughter was Claire. The revelation burned its way out of her like poison leaving the bloodstream. For years, the world had believed Claire's parentage to be another tangled mystery, one of many in Genoa City's twisted lineage, but the truth was far darker. Matt had fathered Claire long before he married Sienna, and he had spent decades hiding it, manipulating the records, bribing those who knew. Claire herself never knew the full truth. She believed she was just another child touched by chaos. But in truth, she was the product of Matt's ambition and deceit, a living embodiment of everything he had built his empire of lies upon. Sienna had seen the documents, the old birth certificates, the sealed adoption papers, the private correspondence between Matt and Jordan. That was another secret she could no longer carry. Matt and Jordan's alliance. They weren't just business partners or accomplices. Their connection was deep, dangerous, almost conspiratorial. They shared everything, schemes, enemies, even affections, and together, they had fooled everyone who ever trusted them. They had manipulated lives like chess pieces, played with families, destroyed reputations, and left others bleeding in their wake. Jordan was the only person Matt respected, the only one who could keep him in check, and that made her the most dangerous woman Sienna had ever known. Living with Matt had become a slow descent into madness. He would remind Sienna every night that she was nothing without him, that she existed only because he allowed it. The bruises on her arms were fading, but the ones inside her never would. She would flinch at every sound, her body tensing even when he wasn't there. Yet through all the fear, she carried a strange kind of power. She knew everything. She knew about his crimes, his affairs, his manipulations, and his lies. She knew about the false identities, Carter Mills, Mitch Bacall, and the trail of blackmail he used to fund his empire. She even knew that he had set Noah's accident in motion, ensuring that the Newmans would be too distracted by grief to see his next move coming. But Sienna had reached her breaking point. When she saw Victoria Newman, fragile yet fierce, fighting for her family with the kind of courage that reminded Sienna of the woman she once wanted to be. She realized she could no longer let Matt's poison spread. She arranged a meeting in secret, trembling as she dialed Victoria's number. When they finally sat together, the tension between them was unbearable. Victoria, unaware of what she was about to hear, waited patiently, sensing that this wasn't just another confession of guilt or betrayal. And then, with shaking hands and eyes full of tears, Sienna spoke the words that would forever change everything. She told Victoria that Claire was not just connected to the Newmans through circumstance, she was connected through blood. But not in the way Victoria believed. Claire was not her daughter. Claire was Matt Clark's daughter. The girl Victoria had fought so hard to protect, the one she had tried to guide, forgive, and understand, she was the offspring of the man who had tried to destroy her family again and again. Sienna explained how Matt had manipulated events years ago to plant the idea of biological connection between Victoria and Claire, ensuring that when the truth eventually surfaced, it would devastate her beyond repair. Victoria's face turned pale, her breath shallow, as she struggled to process what she was hearing. She asked for proof, for something tangible, and Sienna handed her the envelope, the one she had risked everything to steal from Matt's safe. Inside was a DNA report, recently updated, undeniable in its conclusion. Claire's genetic markers matched Matt Clark's perfectly. There was no question. No misunderstanding. It was fact. When Victoria read the name at the top of the report, her body went cold. Her vision blurred, her heartbeat slowed, and the room began to spin. The weight of betrayal, not just from Matt but from fate itself, crashed down on her until her legs gave out. Sienna barely caught her as she fell, the report slipping from her fingers and scattering across the floor. The truth had finally come out, but it had come at a cost. Victoria lost consciousness, her last thought a shattered image of the daughter she thought she had. When Victor and Nick arrived, the sight before them froze their hearts. Victoria lay motionless, her face pale, the report still clutched in her trembling hand. Sienna, crying and shaking, tried to explain everything through her sobs. Nick picked up the papers, his eyes scanning the results with disbelief before rage began to build inside him like a storm. The name Matt Clark glared back at him from the page, a scar that refused to heal. He turned to Sienna, demanding to know if this was another manipulation, but the terror in her eyes told him it wasn't. She had risked everything to tell them the truth. Victor, usually composed even in the face of chaos, went silent. His eyes darkened as he pieced together the implications. Matt had not only deceived them, he had infiltrated their lives again, using his own daughter as a weapon. The patriarch of the Newman family knew what had to be done. This was no longer about justice. It was about protection. He swore that Claire would answer for her part in Matt's schemes, and that Matt himself would never draw another breath free of consequence. Sienna, still trembling, begged them not to take revenge, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. The Newmans had been attacked before, but this time the betrayal came from within, and that was something Victor would not forgive. He ordered his contacts to dig into Matt's network, to expose every lie, every ally, every shadow. Nick, consumed by anger, promised to confront Claire himself. For him, it wasn't just about revenge, it was about ending the cycle that had haunted their family for years. Meanwhile, somewhere in the city, Claire sat alone, unaware of the storm about to consume her. She had always felt an unexplainable connection to chaos, a magnetic pull toward destruction that she could never quite understand. Perhaps, deep down, she already knew the truth, that the darkness in her wasn't something she chose but something she inherited. As night fell, the Newman family gathered in Victor's office, the DNA report spread across the table like a declaration of war. Sienna sat quietly in the corner, her face bruised but defiant, her spirit half broken, half free. She knew there was no going back now. By telling the truth, she had sealed her fate. Matt would come for her, and when he did, there would be no mercy. But she didn't care anymore. She had done the one thing he could never undo. She had given the Newmans the power to destroy him. When Victor finally spoke, his voice was low and steady, carrying the weight of generations. He said they would act swiftly and silently. Claire would be confronted, Matt would be hunted, and justice, real justice, would finally be served. But beneath the vengeance in his tone, there was also sorrow. Because even in victory, the Newmans had lost something sacred, their trust, their peace, and a piece of their humanity. And as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Sienna sat alone outside the Newman Tower, watching the city wake up. The bruises on her skin ached, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. She knew she might not survive what was coming, but for the first time, she no longer feared the truth. She had spoken it. And that made her free.